The climate, all of the above?
I'm going to go with all of the above because I can't single one thing out. I will note that our previous polls this year, in February and in June, Trump led with independents.
Right.
So what happened between June and September? Biden left the ticket. Kamala Harris joined it. There was a surge of enthusiasm. We saw it. There was a surge in the proportion of people we talked to who said they would definitely vote. That was our criterion in June. And now we have an additional criterion if you've already voted. And especially among older people, it's over 90% incidence of people that we talk to in that age group who say they're going to vote, and they tend to vote for Kamala Harris, and women in that age group specifically and strikingly.
And let me ask you something, and I don't want to geek out here because you sort of touched on it, but we hear a lot of pollsters, and Nate Cohn wrote about this in the New York Times this morning, talking about non-response bias, that to try and explain why polls.
Rybí prsty Frosta. Šťavnaté filé obalené v křupavé strouhance. Neuvěřitelně chutné.
With that hadn't been included in their sample, and so they've tried to find ways to weight their polls to account for that and cut that number down. You don't believe that is that's the way to go. Explain it.
Well, I can control what I can control. I can weight to known population parameters.
By the way, when you say
So
wait,
we talked-
I think a lot of people don't know
Yeah.
what that means. What does that mean?
It will sound very anti-democratic. It's some people get a little bit more than one vote, and some people get a little bit less than one vote. So if we end up in our sample and we take a sample of all adults in the state of Iowa, and if we've got too many who are older or too many that are women, we adjust it to look like the census. So we're weighting within congressional districts because they're not all aged appropriately. Some of them have state universities and so on. But we want to adjust our data so it looks like a cross-section of the state of Iowa when it comes to age, sex, geography in particular, race, sometimes education, not so much anymore. And then from that bigger pool, over 1,000 people, we pull out the 808 who met one of our criteria as to be a likely voter. They've already voted, or they say that they will definitely vote. And so from that, cross-section, proper cross-section of the state, if older people are more likely to say they're going to vote, they show up in more plentiful numbers in our likely voter sample.
I see.
It's just that easy. So what I say is I'm allowing my data to reveal to me this future electorate. And the people who are using back, the exit polls or the recalled vote, which I don't think of as very reliable at all, I call that polling backward. So they're adjusting their data to fix the last mistake. I've always allowed my data to show me, without fear or favor, my best shot at what this future electorate is going to look like.
Can I just second John's point?
Yeah,
which is I've worked with you, Ann, over the years. You've polled races I was involved in, and you are a person of great integrity and skill. So when you say something, people listen.
All right. Ann Selzer, really great to have you on. Thank you so much.
About he called the election too big to rig. Let's watch.
I do believe it is too big to rig. I think it's too big to rig. They'll try. And they are trying, though. It's too big to rig. This is a big movement. This is, we did great in 2016. We did much better in 2020, but a lot of bad things happened. This is that big, powerful, vicious party, though. No, it's a vicious machine. I mean, they can take all these bad ideas and win elections. It's like there's only way you can do that. One way. There's only one way.
Sir, if Donald Trump loses the election today, should he concede?
Look, I think that one commitment I think Republicans can make is if Donald Trump loses this election and Kamala Harris becomes the president, God forbid in my case, I'm not rooting for that outcome, Republicans are not going to launch some type of multi-year investigation that impedes the first 2 years of her presidency with false allegations of foreign election interference. We've seen that within the last decade in this country.
Right, but it's a yes or no
contrast,
question, sir. I mean, should he concede or should he not?
I think whoever wins the election should win the election and whoever loses should concede. But the fact of the matter is, when we look at the last 10 years, in case you and I both understand the subtext of this question, there's been this, I think, brewed up concern that I think is really designed, I think in many ways, to mislead voters about what's happened in the last 10 years.
Misleading voters.
There's
I mean,
been
people attacked the
exactly-
Capitol to try to interrupt the
If I may-
process of
if I- if I
certifying
may-
the last election.
If I may just finish my point. That's no doubt been talked. The January 6th this year has been talked about ad nauseum. What hasn't is the fact that the presidency was actually undermined by Kamala Harris and the Democrats, the Democratic Party that Kamala Harris is a part of, for the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency on allegations of a false Russia collusion hoax that was disproven. So what do we want this time around? We want a free, fair election where the winner is decisively decided. Americans can then move forward as a country behind that. Whichever candidate wins, I'm looking forward to that happening for the country. And I'm hoping that's Donald Trump tonight.
Are you confident our election day is going to be free and fair?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think I would ask the same question of you. I have every hope that the polling locations are properly monitored, that you see a lot of the cases that have worked themselves out this time around with respect to early voting, the timestamps that need to be on them. I think Pennsylvania and their courts came down, I think, on the right side of that decision. One of the things that we have a great consciousness of as well is people being able to vote effectively on time. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see an outstanding, well-run election with a great result. And as you know, I'm supporting Donald Trump, and I'm rooting for that victory tomorrow.
All right. Vivek Ramaswamy for us this morning. Sir, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's turn now to this. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have spent the past several weeks looking to win over voters of the opposite gender, respectively. At the same time, in the final days of this campaign, Trump and his allies have gone after Harris and other Democratic women in remarkably
On the final day of their respective presidential campaigns, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris both predicted victory on Monday, with opinion polls showing them locked in a dead heat. The candidates concentrated their efforts in Pennsylvania, the biggest prize on Election Day among the 7 states expected to decide the outcome.
Trump appeared before a large crowd in Pittsburgh, where he delivered what his campaign called his closing message to voters.
I will restore peace in the world, and I will rescue the American dream.
Trump pushed economic themes, vowing to deliver an economic boom, while warning Harris would bring economic misery.
My message to Americans tonight is simple. We do not have to live this way. We don't.
Trump's frantic Monday schedule also included stops in the battleground states of North Carolina and Michigan before returning to his Florida home Monday night. Meanwhile, Harris packed in 5 campaign stops in Pennsylvania throughout the day. In Allentown, she appealed to the city's sizable Puerto Rican community after a comedian at a Trump rally last week made racist comments about Puerto Ricans and other minority groups.
We are not going back. We are not going back.
Later, Harris went door-knocking in Reading and held her own brief rally in Pittsburgh. Harris ended the day with an event in Philadelphia, where she was joined by A-list celebrities, including Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey. Harris forecast a close race and for the last time implored Pennsylvanians to get out the vote.
The race ain't over yet. And we must finish strong. And this could be one of the closest races in history. Every single vote matters.
The Harris campaign says its internal data shows that undecided voters are breaking in their favor. It reports an increase in early voting among core parts of its coalition, including young voters and voters of color. Trump campaign officials meanwhile said they were monitoring early voting results that show more women have voted than men. That is significant considering Harris's 12-point edge over Trump among female registered voters, according to an October Reuters Ipsos poll. The winner may not be known for days after Tuesday's vote. Trump and his allies, who falsely claim his 2020 election loss was the result of fraud, have already signaled they will attempt to fight any defeat. They have spent months laying the groundwork to again challenge the result if he loses. Harris campaign officials said any attempts by Trump to allege fraud will fail, while Democrats say they have plans in place should Trump try to prematurely claim victory.
As all eyes are on the much-awaited election result, let's also talk about the several key issues at stake in the U.S. elections. Economy is number one. Remember, economy has been spoken of widely, and yes, the Republicans and the Democrats have a very different opinion on how they want to take that forward in terms of
All right, we're coming to you live from the Howard University here in Washington, D.C. This is the alma mater of the Vice President, Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee. You can see the stage being set up right behind me. You can see the Secret Service. You can see people working away, trying to perfect the stage. She is going to be here a little past 11 p.m. is what we are being told. Of course, depending on the result, if she wins and if we know the results by tonight, we're hoping that she will come here for her victory speech. She will be joined by her running mate, Tim Walz, who, of course, will be joining her after a campaign rally earlier in the day. So the update that we have for you right now, in less than 1 hour, polls will be closing at 6 o'clock Eastern time. It's a little past 5 o'clock Eastern time here. What you need to keep an eye out for, and if you're watching this in India and around the world, 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 5:30 in the morning, Wednesday morning in India, that's when the first big state of Georgia will close. That's 16 electoral college votes. Biden had won it by a narrow 12,000 votes in 2020. If Kamala Harris manages to win Georgia, then that opens up 270 to win the White House. But if Georgia stays red, as it has always been, except in 2020, then Donald Trump is on firmer footing. Then at 7:30, which is at 6 a.m. India time, North Carolina, which is another big state, again, 16 electoral college votes.
County of the state. You have it up here in Raleigh-Durham, the Research Triangle. An African-American population plus a high college-educated population, a lot of young voters. So both parties have their base. The question is who can win the middle.
Just one thing to look at in these states, right? So let's look at the African-American population and bring it out. The darker the shading, the higher the African-American population. This is North Carolina, and then I'll bring you out and come down and we'll look at the state of Georgia. The Democrats have a built-in base here if Kamala Harris can get high turnout and keep the loyalty of African-American voters. African-American turnout critical in these two states. Here's a different way to look at it. You can look at it this way and bring this out here. Let me do this here for you. Race and ethnicity. This is the state of Georgia. Right, 51% white, 31% of the state population is black, African-American voters, the foundation of the Democratic Party. That's in North Carolina. You pop out to the United States just to get the look. It's 12% nationally, right? And that's what it is in Georgia. And then you come over here to North Carolina and look again, 21% there. So two states that have a significant African-American population. If Kamala Harris can not only win that with a high percentage, but they'd come up with a really high number. It's not just the percentage, she needs the math in the urban areas as well.
So what else do you have in these states? Let's come back out and let's turn this. In both states, again, Donald Trump has a rural base. Democrats have an urban base. This will be decided, that's Virginia, excuse me. This will be decided in the suburbs. And again,
Joe Biden, this was the closest. This was Donald Trump's closest win, if you will. 74,000 votes here of his battleground wins. This was the closest one in North Carolina. And of course, we all remember all the controversy about Georgia after the last one. Georgia and Arizona were two of the big surprises. How did it happen? It happened here. The Atlanta suburbs, the changing, especially the farther out suburbs. High African-American turnout in the cities, and then you move out into the suburbs. And again, you just look at this here. Let me take this off and look at just what happened, right? So I like to go to the farther out suburbs. The close-in suburbs in the last few elections have become solidly Democratic. So you move more out. Cobb. When I started doing this, this was ruby red. Right? Joe Biden got 56% of the vote. But look at Donald Trump's number, 42% in Cobb County. Let's go back to 2016. 47% in Cobb County. That's the difference. The margins within the battlegrounds, and the suburbs are those battlegrounds. So come over here to Gwinnett County. Again, when I started doing this, this was a ruby red county. Let's focus on Trump, not Clinton. He gets 45% in 2016. You come to 20, he drops down to 40%. That's the difference in battleground Georgia, because he will run it up in all these rural red areas. The question is, can the Democrats get the urban vote out in here and here, and then what happens in the suburbs? And increasingly, you start in the close-in suburbs. As we have moved out in the last couple of elections, Jake, Democrats have had more test in North Carolina and Georgia, Jake.
We shall see. All right, so we're here in the Howard University, which is Kamala Harris's alma mater. Polls will be closing in about 45 minutes' time at 6 p.m. ET. The first set of states will be closing. These are states, of course, in the East Coast, which are not battleground states. The first big milestone you need to be watching out for is 7 o'clock Eastern Time, which is 5:30 a.m. In India, which is when Georgia closes. Georgia is a critical state. It's 16 electoral college votes. Biden won it in 2020. Trump won it in 2016. It has been a solidly Republican state, except in 2020. So if early on in the night, Kamala Harris manages to flip Georgia, that is a sign that she then has multiple paths to 270. If she doesn't, then she has to depend on the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. The second milestone to look out for is 7:30 Eastern, which is 6 a.m. India time. At that time, of course, North Carolina closes. And again, a state which Biden could not flip. He won 6 out of 7 swing states last time, but he did not win North Carolina. Again, if Harris swings North Carolina, because there is a substantial African-American population in that state, then again, early on in the night, it gives you an indication that Harris has multiple paths to 270. And then, of course, the big one is at 8 o'clock Eastern time when Pennsylvania closes. That is the biggest battleground state. It's 19 electoral college votes. It is an absolute must-win for Harris. If she does not win Pennsylvania, then she has to win 6 out of the other 7 battleground states, which at this stage, at least if you were to go by the opinion polls, looks highly unlikely. So she has to win Pennsylvania. Remember last time in 2020, it took 4 days after polls closed for the networks to eventually declare Pennsylvania going in favor of Joe Biden. He won that by, again, a narrow margin, just about 80,000 odd votes. This time, Kamala Harris is hoping that because of the extensive ground operation, the door knocking, the phone calls of the Democratic Party machine, as it were, the grassroots machine, as it were, she's hoping that this is a state that she can retain. And if Pennsylvania is retained at 8 o'clock, then that is a good sign for Kamala Harris, because in the next hour, which is 9 o'clock Eastern time, that will be 7:30 a.m. in India, the 2 other blue wall states, Wisconsin and Michigan, 10 electoral college votes and 15 electoral college votes, that 25 between them, they will close at 9 p.m. Eastern. And generally, the trend has been in those blue wall states, whichever way Pennsylvania goes, Wisconsin and Michigan go as well. In 2016, Trump won all 3 of them. 4 years before that, Barack Obama won all 3 of them. In fact, they have been solidly blue wall states if you go back all the way up to the 1980s. So that is going to be the critical, perhaps narrow path to 270, but certainly the most viable path to 270 for Kamala Harris if she has to win the Electoral College. Of course, in the popular vote, chances are that she will outpip Donald Trump, much like Joe Biden did 4 years ago, or even Hillary Clinton did 8 years ago. But the critical factor for Kamala Harris is to ensure that she retains the 3 blue wall, or the Great Lakes states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Between them, 44 electoral college votes.
S chutí sloužím všem, po dlouhá léta oblíben. Jsem Florián, jogurt, co generace spojuje.
A place that holds very special meaning for her. In fact, she had come here a few months ago, just around the time that she had just finished accepting the nomination of the Democratic Party, and at that time there was great enthusiasm amongst the students of Howard University, not just for the fact that one of their alumni is going to potentially become the next president of the United States, but also the fact that she would be making history if she did become the president, that she would be the first woman president, the first African-American woman president, and also the first Indian-American president of the United States. So we're hoping to hear from Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz, both of whom will be here with their families. Whether it's going to be a victory speech or a concession speech, we don't know. The important thing is we're hoping to know that one way or the other, some form of the results will be declared by later tonight itself. 2020 was an aberration because 2020 had a lot of mail-in ballots, over 100 million mail-in ballots. In fact, in some states like Pennsylvania, you could mail in even after election day was over. So that's why it took so long in 2020 for the counting to happen. If you were to go back to 2016 or 2012, by about 10, 11 p.m. Eastern, you have a fair idea. Most networks would have called the election by 10, 11 p.m. As to who has won the election. But ultimately, to get it certified, to tally every single vote, that might take much longer. But the projections of who is winning these battleground states, because ultimately whoever wins a bulk of these battleground states goes on to win the presidency, that I suspect, if we go back, if we discount the aberration of 2020 and go back to how it was in 2016 or in 2012, then by about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock Eastern time, you would get a fair idea of who has won the battleground states and thereby who has won the presidency. So history is really at stake as far as Kamala Harris is concerned. Remember, she will become, if she wins, the first ever African-American woman, Indian-American president of the United States. So history beckons for her, and she will be here later on tonight for as the cookie crumbles or as the results go, whether it's going to be a victory speech or a concession speech. We will have to wait and see.
Well, earlier we showed you that surprising new poll out of Iowa. It shows Vice President Harris up 3 points over the former president, 47% to 44%, which is a big turnaround from the same poll in September. Now, that number is still within the margin of error, so there's no clear leader. But a swing like this, and from such a well-respected pollster with a long track record in Iowa, has some wondering if this could be an indication that Harris may overperform in the Midwest Tuesday night, including even in battlegrounds like Wisconsin. Today, while speaking in Pennsylvania, the former president attacked the pollster and said the poll was intentionally skewed to favor Harris.
I got a poll, I'm 10 points up in Iowa. One of my enemies just puts out a poll, I'm 3 down. Why do they announce a poll that's highly skewed toward Democrats and liberals? Why do they do that? When you read it, they interviewed far more Democrats than they did Republicans. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? And I guess there's a law that they have to say that because they would have preferred not having to say that.
Well, I'm joined now by Jay Ann Selzer, whose firm, Selzer & Company, conducted the poll, and back with us is David